It's been 200 years since the world's first railway journey. Since then, we've had steam trains, overnight sleepers, and high-speed rail reaching 300 miles per hour. With the railway, the world opened up. Victorian families took holidays to the coast. Seasonal produce from rural farms filled urban markets within hours. People began commuting to work and suburbs sprang up around new stations. And by the early 20th century, you could board a train in London and reach Paris, Berlin, Vienna, even Constantinople. The world as we know it may not have existed without the trains. And this town in particular only exists because of one decision.
This was really where Crewe became a really important part of the UK's railways.
Before the 1830s, most of Crewe was just open farmland. Then, the Grand Junction Railway chose it as the site for their vast new locomotive works, right at the junction of the lines to Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham. This is where a huge amount of British trains were built. They brought in workers from Edge Hill in Liverpool and had to build an entire town from scratch to house them. Within a few years, there were rows of company-built houses, schools, gas, sewers, and what would become one of the busiest stations in Britain.
Town was the railway, and the railway was the town.
Crewe grew entirely around the works, and for decades, the railway effectively ran the town. So let's look at how one company turned this once empty patch of land into one of the most important railway towns in the world. I'm standing right outside Crewe's modern station, so let's go and have a look inside and see what we can find. So Rich is with me right now, and we're going to see if we can get platform tickets. We've never actually done this before, but we've not actually taken the train from Crewe. We did drive here. I think you have to go to a person. This might be the wrong entrance, actually. Okay, that didn't work. We need to actually buy these tickets from a person, and there is no person down there. So we are going to head out this way. We'll be talking about this hotel later on in the video, but this hotel was a railway hotel built for the passengers of the railway. How do you reckon we get around? While we work that out, let me explain why Crewe grew in this location. In the 1830s, the Grand Junction Railway needed a central hub for building and maintaining locomotives. Their line linked Liverpool and Manchester with Birmingham and the south, and their existing workshops at Edge Hill in Liverpool were cramped and awkwardly placed at the far end of the network. They wanted somewhere more central, a junction where several lines could meet, and the farmland that became Crewe sat exactly at that crossroads.
Where the modern town is today, there were a few houses, all farming. Church Coppenall, a little bit further to the north, was a more established community, but again, very small. So really, it was a rural hamlet.
There were plans for connecting routes to Chester and North Wales, which would give them even better access to coalfields and ports. Just as importantly, this land was cheap, flat and undeveloped. The company could build whatever they needed without buying expensive urban plots or demolishing existing buildings. So they chose Crewe, not because there was a town there, but because there wasn't. Its location made it perfect for the railway, and the town grew purely because of that decision. So you can even see now just how big Crewe is, and you know, Crewe is a large town, but it's not serving a population size like Birmingham or Liverpool, but the station is still massive, and that is largely because of its position, and it does have trains going north, south, east and west. Take two. Hiya, is it possible to buy 2 platform tickets?
Just ask to let you through.
Oh, will they let us through? All right, thank you. Apparently they will just let us through. Yeah, we just asked to buy some platform tickets, but he said that you'll be able to just let us through. Thank you. We're in. Save 20p. One of the most interesting things about this station is that it could very easily have not been here, as the Grand Junction Railway was choosing from a few different places in the area, including pre-established towns. Other towns like Winsford and Nantwich turned them down. Most of these towns had much larger settlements and they didn't want the Junction Railway to be here. So they chose this spot, which was almost directly opposite Crewe Hall, and just built it in the middle of the countryside.
Crewe, where it is now, was the right choice or not. You know, we can argue about that, and people do. It certainly created many challenges. There were no natural resources, so no coal, and yet the railway until 1968 was entirely dependent on coal as a source of fuel, and the engineering works required vast amounts of energy in the form of steam to drive machines, all generated with coal. So that had to be brought in. We were not on the canal network, although there have been attempts to connect to the canal system at Middlewich. Water supply was a real problem. The Valley Brook was inadequate within very short order, and of course was used not only as a source of water but also as a source of sewage, much to the dissatisfaction of everybody downstream. You know, there was significant work required to just get the town a reasonable water supply, and that did not happen until 19.
So this train here is going to Carmarthen, all the way in Wales. This is a Transport for Wales train that will cross the border relatively soon. And then we've also got a train from this one going to London Euston. So Crewe Station has 12 platforms. It's really big for a town of its size. And if you just stand here for a few minutes, you will see trains from every corner of the country. So we've got that train going to Manchester Piccadilly. We've got trains going to London Euston. We've got this Transport for Wales behind me going to Carmarthen. We've got trains going east to Derby and the East Midlands. And we've got trains going all the way up to Glasgow Central. And it's not just one operator. We've got Avanti West Coast City Expresses, London North Western commuter services, Northern Locals, Transport for Wales trains heading west, East Midlands Railway heading east, and even the Caledonian Sleeper passing through at night. These platform buildings here date from 1867, and they were designed by the LNWR's chief engineer, William Baker. As you can see, they're Italianate in style. So they've got polychrome brickwork, cream and orange bands running through the walls, and arcaded openings. Then there's these heavy stone keystones above the arches, which are sometimes nicknamed greybeards. Historic England has listed these as Grade 2, saying that they are among the finest railway architecture in mid-Victorian Britain. And they've been standing here for more than 150 years. We're going to go and see how Victorian it looks inside. And this is what nowadays you can purchase at Crewe Station. This is a chain, isn't it? I've seen these in lots of different stations. Oh, do they? Is it W. Smith brand? Or, what's it called now? By 1903, the platforms here had been extended to be nearly a quarter of a mile long. That gives you a sense of the sheer scale of traffic running through Crewe at the height of the railway age. The station was remodelled again in the 1980s, with major re-signalling to create the modern layout that we see today. But despite all of these changes, Crewe has never lost its role as one of the country's greatest railway crossroads. And you can kind of see why it became such a pivotal junction from a bit of an elevated perspective. So straight down the middle are the fast lines to London and Scotland. This train here is off to London Euston. I can see a train over there that's going towards Holyhead. So sort of Chester, Holyhead, Wales will be going down that way. And I think generally the Manchester lines were going from these platforms towards the east. But by the late 19th century, passenger traffic was overwhelming the main station. Passenger and freight trains were constantly blocking each other. So the London and North Western Railway built independent lines that passed around the main station, which allowed good trains to completely bypass the congestion. And just south of here at Basford Hall, they built one of the biggest marshalling yards in all of Britain. And we've got this Italianate architecture on this side as well. So it is quite the establishment these days as well. So if you're changing in Crewe and you're hungry, you should be able to find something. And we've even got the train times in Welsh here. Oh, this is a poem here that was commissioned by Avanti West Coast. That's nice. Let's start at the start, our heart, at the beat of a town with tracks at its veins, are the pulsing part to what remains. If tick follows tock, then what follows lock? Joseph Locke, the man who spade, was the first that laid Crewe's rail crusade, who was unafraid to win and persuade. So when the platforms were first opened, back in 1837, when people only dreamt about travelling down to Devon. Just remember Joseph Locke and his amazing railway vision, and you too might agree that Crewe was his best decision. Now that brings me on to a good segue about Locke. So who was Locke and what was his importance in Crewe?
He started out as an engineer with the Grand Junction Railway when that was being planned, and the overall engineer in charge at the time was George Stephenson, and the line was divided into two sections, section south of Stafford towards Birmingham, and northern section to effectively join the Manchester Railway. Over the course of a couple of years, Locke and Stephenson had something of a falling out. There were a significant number of differences between the two men. Recognise Joseph Locke today as a highly skilled project manager. Stephenson was what you might call more of an intuitive engineer, and they disagreed over the approach. One of the critical junctures came when the directors of the company wanted to ensure the lowest cost build, if you would. Stephenson was very averse to severe gradients and tunnels, and would always opt for a longer route. Joseph Locke was convinced that locomotive traction would only improve with time. They'd get powerful and capable, and therefore more severe gradients were less of a problem. And eventually Stephenson resigned. At that point, Joseph was made engineer in charge.
So we've just walked out of Crewe Station, and right here we have Crewe Arms Hotel. Nowadays, if you're changing trains at Crewe, you'll likely be waiting 10 minutes to half an hour. But obviously back in the early days of the railway, you might have been waiting overnight. So this is why this was built. So this is the Crewe Arms Hotel, and opened originally as a hotel that served passengers passing through, including none other than Queen Victoria. She actually stayed here quite a few times when she was journeying from London to Scotland by train. Apparently, she actually had her own underground passage built that went all the way from the station up to the hotel. So this hotel passed into the ownership of London and North Western Railway in 1846. It does say 1880 on top of there. So the hotel was actually substantially rebuilt in 1880. And that is pretty much the building that you see now. Crewe was not all about the stations though. It became a major hub for trains to be built. So to see how a rural station turned into one of the nation's greatest locomotive works, we're going to head to the Crewe Heritage Centre and learn a bit more about it. Now Richard has joined me on this journey today. He hasn't been on any other of my Start of the British Railway journeys. And also joining us are Richard's parents, who are currently in B&Q, so we're going to go find them. We have arrived at the Crewe Heritage Railway Centre. This site is the birthplace of Crewe as an industrial town. The Crewe Heritage Centre stands on the exact ground where the original works were built in the 1840s. The London and North Western Railway chose Crewe as the location for their main engineering complex. At the time, this was the largest railway works in the world, and it employed more than 7,000 people.
Pretty much wasn't anything they could make in Crewe Works that wasn't worth talking about. They could pretty much build a train from scratch. They built their own rails, they had their own steel forge, so they pretty much did everything. The artisans there were pretty skilled, and during the wars they used to make stuff for the war, so they even made artificial legs and stuff for the soldiers returning, so they turned their hands to everything.
Even just right here, we've got trains here. We've got a big warehouse looking building here. Let's go in and find more about Crewe's railway story. So the first locomotive here was completed in 1843, and over the decades that followed, thousands of engines rolled out of these workshops, and it was this that gave Crewe the reputation as a railway town. So Rich has just pointed out that this was used for the royals when they came to town. So these were just cabs which anyone would go into, used in the 1970s, and it was to go over the whole works. So this was, a massive complex at one point, and you needed these carriages to get around it. But when the royals came, they actually used this cab, and then it was known as the Royal Cab. The King George V and Queen Mary didn't actually stand in these. They were kitted up, they were cleaned, they were equipped with sliding doors and comfortable seats, so it did look a little bit more royal at the time. British Rail Class 87. This is a type of electric locomotive constructed by British Rail Engineering Limited between 1973 and 1975 here in Crewe. 36 of these locomotives were built to work passenger services on the West Coast Main Line between London and Glasgow. It was considered to be the flagship of British Rail's electric locomotive fleet until the late 1980s. So yeah, there were all sorts of trains constructed here in Crewe, constructed within these works. Seem to have a new train driver here in Crewe. Hello, what are you doing in there? Are you? I didn't realise you could get in.
Speed 95 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Screen, you can watch the screen.
So Crewe would have also been somewhere where a lot of train drivers were trained.
Were they?
Yeah, well, it was everything. It was where trains were built, where trains were repaired. It was just train. Everything was train related. So there's model railways as well in the Heritage Centre, but this is not the UK, not Crewe. This is Austria. This looks a bit more British. We've got these. We've got the Intercity APT. We've got a steam train with cargo. So this was very much all still the works, and the rails are just here. So this is very much the station area. And we're going to go into one of the Intercity APT trains. Ooh, this looks retro. This looks comfier than most trains. This is like what you get in first class these days, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, maybe it was first class.
Operates at 140 miles an hour on existing railway lines, like tilting into the curves. The problem is the tilting gear froze up. So you often hear stories of the tilt being on all the way from Glasgow to London.
Oh, you'll be on like this?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and also it induced a bit of sickness in people as well as it did that, so they couldn't quite get the balance right. Whereas
The
newer ones, the Pendolinos, did copy the technique, but they used, instead of active tilting, they've got this the pendulum, which just smoothly takes it across, a much simpler design, so it wouldn't freeze up.
Taking those on the school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's
And
what...
it's got the same slanty sides.
Yeah.
And standing.
And parcels. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Well, I suppose if
If it's tilting, yeah. Yeah. Could
Be
get
like this.
seasickness.
They did used to call this the train that made passengers sick.
Yes. Remember that.
Oh, here comes the train. Oh, that was the buffet.
Yeah. Look, the little bits. Do the cigarettes. Embassy, number 6.
Oh,
They
yeah.
had smoking and non-smoking areas.
Yeah.
All the train.
The same on planes.
Really?
You would sit on a plane in a non-smoking area.
What's the
Yeah.
point? Because that's...
At the back, the non-smoking was at the back, and all the smoke from the front
Oh, yeah.
came up to you anyway.
Yeah,
So-
it doesn't escape.
What year was this, Paul?
So early 80s,
Okay.
but it was developed through the 70s. I think it probably started in the 60s.
Well, you could get a full dinner.
Yeah.
Cool.
Grilled Scotch
It's much better service than we get these days.
salad. 3-course meal on a train the other week.
I did, but I paid for it.
Sandwiches look a bit old, don't they? I don't think I'll order one.
So this was 1984, and you can see here the dinner menu. Asparagus soup, grilled Scotch salmon steak, coffee and mandarin cream gatto. Okay, so that was first class that we were in now, and this is your standard class. Just one lonely passenger in this carriage. Where are you off to today? Preston? You're going to Preston? What are you doing there?
Where would you like to go today?
Oh no, it's broken down again.
Oh, will we get our delay repay?
The red button.
That's that then.
So not all of these actual trains were made in Crewe, but it does show the importance of Crewe as a railway town. It just shows the railway heritage and significance that Crewe has always had. This was the HST, which is otherwise known as the Intercity 125 train. This was like kind of the APT's rival, and they were competing against each other for speed. It was a diesel train that could go up to 200 kilometres per hour. That is pretty speedy. It was in the 1970s. And the British Rail were hoping that it would be a sophisticated and cosmopolitan era for rail travel, but they didn't have much money. So they weren't really able to make it into fruition. A total of 197 were constructed here at the Crewe Works between 1975 and 1982. So let's go and have a little look inside. I think this is what we've got to remember. Like, this all started in the 1830s, the 1840s, but it really did carry on until, well, British Rail thought that it was going to be a sophisticated era for rail travel in the 1970s, and we've still got the Crewe Works today, so it still is a very important railway town. Max speed 125 miles an hour, which I believe is about 200 kilometres. It's pretty speedy for the time. At the Crewe Heritage Centre today, you can see historic signal boxes and control rooms which show you how the railways were run. I think if we go in here, there is actually a signal box. This is actually the Exeter West box, interestingly. We're nowhere near Exeter, but it seems to have found its home here. Oh yeah, Great Western Railway. But yeah, it used to go up. It went up all the way to Liverpool, DWR. Because when I was in Liverpool, yeah, I saw a GWR warehouse and I was like, what's that doing there? Hiya.
Morning.
This is remarkable.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We've come back to 1960 now.
Yeah, yeah.
Good old swinging 60s, eh? So, yeah.
And this just would have been doing all the signals of the...
Down in Exeter St David's.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, it was operating up to 1985.
Wow.
And then they modernised it then with colour light signalling.
Yeah, got to the mark.
So this signal box used to be in Crewe Station. This signal box was moved in its entirety from Crewe Station and put in the Heritage Centre for when we opened in 1987. And that was part of the upgrades for Crewe Station. So it was upgraded in 1985 and a lot of the mechanical, well, all the mechanical signalling was removed and Crewe Power Box was built, which is still in existence and still operational, just across the track in the red and white building. So this is Crewe Station A. There was numerous signal boxes in Crewe Station, and the reason this was built was it was basically a ratification of the signalling around Crewe. So before the turn of the century, in the late 1800s, the company at the time, the London North Western train company, basically realised that Crewe was a bit congested, and the third island of the station didn't actually exist. It was only the first two islands where platform 5 are currently. So where this was facing didn't actually exist. Freight trains were becoming more of a thing, and they realised they had to do something about it because they were losing money basically. So they had to spend money to keep the money going. So they invested heavily into the railway, and they decided to build a completely separate railway that runs past Crewe. If you look on Google Maps, you can see it really clearly. If you look south of Crewe, you can see a whole diversion line that goes off to the west, and that formed the Bastford Hall Independent Lines and Bastford Hall Yard, which again is still in operation today. They built that whole separate line, connected it up with the other signal boxes in the area. There's actually tunnels that run under this site because to join them back onto the West Coast Main Line, so it divides off the West Coast Main Line to the south of Crewe and rejoins it to the north. It also joins onto the Manchester lines, and to achieve that, they actually built some tunnels. The project took them about 15 years from start to finish. This was one of 8 signal boxes, I think, that were created as part of that venture, including Crewe North Junction, Crewe South Junction, and a couple others in the station, which again were ratified over the years. When signalling was first invented, they didn't really have signals. They literally did everything on time interval signalling, which basically meant there was a man with a flag, normally a policeman. They would stand there with a flag, and they would know the time to take to get from A to B. So say Crewe to Chester takes about 20 minutes, they would send the train and go, right, 20 minutes is gone. We assume that train's arrived safely. So they would send the next train, and that would happen on both directions. The problem with that is, as you can expect, if the first train broke down or had any issues, the second train would plough straight into the back of it because no one knew it stopped. And after quite a lot of people died, and several major events, they were like, oh, we need some signals.
Yeah.
Which is then good, but then they're still in charge, there's still a human in charge of that system. So some more crashes occurred, and they said, right, we need a way of controlling the signals, so it takes a little bit of human error out of it. We need some rules, and really, trains are getting more popular. We probably need to think about this a little bit better. So this is where the absolute block system came in. So if I wanted to signal a train from that, say that was Crewe South, if they wanted to send me a train, they'd have to call my attention. So they would ding a bell once, which basically means, oh, I want you, pay attention. I would ding back to them and say, yeah, what do you want? And then they would give me a head code. They would give me a train. So all the types of trains we have on the railway all have their own code. So a class 1 express train on the railway in modern days is 4 bells. So they would do that, and I would be like, oh, you want to send me a passenger train? Fair enough. It's a platform, so that kind of makes sense. So what I would then do is I would check my diagram, make sure I've not got trains there already, make sure my clearing points are fine, which is basically the overlap for my signals, and make sure all my points are set correctly. So if all the levers are in the frame, it means they're all in the normal position. So I'd look at all that. It would take me seconds because I'm good at my job, whereas because I'm explaining to you, it takes a little longer, but I'd be able to do that quite quickly in my brain, even though there's quite a lot of rules surrounding that. So I would reply. So that's me replying, and I would go to line clear. Now that line clear allows that signal box basically to send me the train. So they can't send me the train unless I tell them they can.
So from this viewing platform, you can see the scale of the railway landscape around Crewe. Like, look how many tracks there are. So the mainline station is just down there, and I think around this side, which we are going to go to in a bit, is the modern Alston Works, and these works still build and refurbish the trains today. So Crewe had 19th century railway origins, but it is very much linked to 21st century train travel today.
At its height, the works was probably employing around 7,500 to 8,000 people. You will find on that great arbiter of truth, Wikipedia and others, that Crewe Works employed at its height 20,000 people. There is no evidence that it ever employed that many. I suspect that number is an aggregate of all of the railway functions in the town. Employment, you worked for the railway. What was Crewe Works? Quite possibly the biggest railway engineering works in the world at its height. Is now, there is just a fragment of it. The station is by no means as big an employer as it used to be, but is still a significant railway hub on the network. Across the town, there are numerous businesses and industries still railway related. So the railway remains a significant source of employment.
This is Alston, which is the new works. Now, it is very much a works. People are, well, they're probably not at work today because it's Sunday, but it is very high security. We obviously can't go in there. But let me tell you a little bit about it. At its height, Crewe Works employed more than 7,000 people. Whole families worked here. The scale was staggering, and by the late 19th century, Crewe Works was churning out hundreds of locomotives and countless carriages and wagons every single year. This is where a huge amount of British trains were built. In 1868, Crewe opened one of the earliest steelworks in Britain, and it produced rails and components for the growing network.
Another character with ties to the railway is Francis Webb. Born in 1836, he joined the London and North Western Railway as an apprentice at Crewe Works and rose quickly through the ranks. By his mid-20s, he was working directly under John Ramsbottom, the company's chief mechanical engineer, and became his trusted assistant. When Ramsbottom retired in 1871, Webb succeeded him, and he became one of the most influential figures in Crewe's railway story.
A phenomenal engineer, transforming Crewe Works methodologies and what it was capable of, and that helped cement the place in the eyes of the country and in the eyes of the world as huge railway centre of excellence. Webb introduced an enormous number of innovations. Perhaps his most significant one of the earliest was the use of steel production. It drove the creation of what was known as the steel works, and he used steel for the making of locomotive boilers. He used steel for the making of rails. He brought electricity into the works, probably an early user of the telephone. I think he patented 80 inventions, 78 of which were to do with railways. He absolutely left his mark on on the town.
However, the works were all about change, and the 20th century saw some decline. This is because diesel and new engines were built and there was less innovation, so it was less frequent that these trains needed to be produced. But the site is very much still active, as you can see behind me. Today it is run by Alstom. The scale is much smaller than the Victorian age when we didn't have cars, but it does still continue. So when you look at the size of this site, you'll see why Crewe was unlike anywhere else. And this was very much the heart of the community. Generations of families were working here, skills were being passed down, everything was tied to the works. And even today, although much of it is gone, trains are still being built and maintained behind these gates. Nearly 2 centuries after the first locomotive rolled out, Crewe is still a railway town. The rain is coming down thick and fast, but I've got one more stop that is just going to demonstrate how much Crewe was the centre of a railway community. So let's hope I don't get too drenched in the process. This is Queen's Park, and the rain had stopped, but it has just started again. So we've seen the industrial, work-heavy side of Crewe, but it wasn't only a place of locomotives and factories. The London and North Western Railway, which built the station and the works, also shaped everyday life here.
First few years of the Grand Junction Railway, there was a very paternalistic attitude. They recognised that they would need to provide for those men and their families who had been relocated. So they were obliged to provide all of the utilities, for example, so gas, street lighting, though there were numerous complaints for decades about the scarcity of lamps. There were probably only about 6. Sewerage, which was equally very dubiously done compared with what expected times. Water supply, they recognised too that they would have to provide for the educational and spiritual needs. Church was provided by the generosity of the directors of the Grand Junction Railway, and they built a school attached to that. Christchurch girls, Christchurch boys, and then later known as the Central Schools. They had a purpose-built mechanics institution, which was successively enlarged by the London North Western Railway Company at least 2 times. The railway company was absolutely intrinsically involved in the development of the town.
And they made this large green space. You can see the Victorian bandstand up there. They planted trees and just wanted to have somewhere where their workers could enjoy the outdoors. This was partially because the LNWR wanted to provide for its workforce, but also because it wanted to improve loyalty and stability. And for many, it was their first real access to green space in an industrial town. And Crewe was one of the clearest examples of a company town where one employer had a huge monopoly, and they did provide for most aspects of an employee's life. So that is Crewe, a town that wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for the railway. Today there are different employers, people commute, and life doesn't revolve entirely around the trains, but it will forever be a place that has its roots on the railway. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you'd like to watch more of my train videos, and if you haven't caught up already, you can find my train travel playlist here. Thanks so much, and I hope I'll see you next time. Bye! I have made it to Scarborough. Today I wanted to talk about a different kind of railway, and this is the funicular.
The first funiculars that were used were mainly for things like defensive castles.
So when it closed, as you can see, the 2 funiculars were fixed into place there.
In fact, I think we were the first tourist resort beside the sea.